right? In its 2001 survey by the Washington Post, it found that 61% of people on average believed that Black people had the same access to healthcare. 51% believed that we had the same access or similar or better education. And 50% believed that whites and Blacks are about as well off in their jobs. And so when combined, whites held at least 70% of whites held at least one false belief about these important Black-white differentials. And so this is critical, right? This is deeply important because it allows these kinds of assumptions about power and privilege to go unchecked because people are unwilling or unable to actually find and navigate appropriate sources when they're trying to find information on these things. And so with regards to the impact on the white racial frame and how it kind of impacts the everyday structures, a couple of things I want to lift up before we move into talking about our particular notion of racial resilience. One is language evasion, right? And by this, we mean the way in which we even talk about racism. Often it's in the passive tense. And so we'll say things like, you know, maybe 45% of Black people say they have had experienced discrimination when applying for a mortgage, rather than talking about the ways in which the mortgage industry or the banking industry itself, run predominantly by white people, continues to historically marginalize Black people, right? And so instead of using the active tense, we use a passive tense. You know, we say things like maybe 70% of African Americans are discriminated against, instead of saying like white people discriminate like against Black people 70% of the time, right? So the ways in which we frame these things are often really important in terms of how we can hold ourselves accountable to the reality of what we are experiencing. I think it's also one way it pops up is how some folks get really uncomfortable when you say things like white people, and they say, well, it's not all white people. And that is one of the ways in which that's able to kind of divert or change the subject and take the decenter, I would say, the experience of people of color and recenter it on the ways in which perhaps some white people may feel as though they're being victimized because they're being lumped in with the group. And the challenge with this is that if someone is talking about or in generalizing the ways in which the majority of a certain group of people are, then if that does not include you, there has to be a way in which you are able to decenter yourself and not see yourself as a part of this larger group if you know you are doing what you are supposed to be doing, while also recognizing that historically this has been the case, that it has been most white people who have done A, B, C, or D. And lastly, and the importance of collective memory and collective forgetting. We talked about historical amnesia in terms of the ways in which it kind of adds to collective forgetting, to suppress or weaken collective memories of societal impression. But collective memory is also pretty important because what that does, it recasts the past in ways that give that lift up and memorialize or glorify certain things in ways in which that are inconsistent with reality. And we see this happen in the ways in which, if you were to ask, like statistically, you ask like older white people how things were in the 50s and 60s, and most often the language they use, what they talk about, is not nearly as, they don't talk about things as bad, for instance, as Black people, because their experience is rooted in themselves without this awareness of how other people were being treated or and how that impacted their day-to-day lives. Fegan talks about this so much in his book, and it's a really important point because unless we begin to understand the experiences of those people who are beyond ourselves and have compassion towards them, we are going to have a very difficult time actually moving towards developing an anti-racist conscience.